Thank you, boss. All right. Okay. So I'm going to move on and have my new panelists enter the fray. Next speaker, actually, Dr. Barbara Nemko, the superintendent of Napa County Schools, and one of the, enlightened in this market, one of the intellectual leaders of what's going on in education today. So I'm really excited to hear from you, Barbara. Do you want to share screens?
Nope.
Okay.
Nope.
So are we going to do this interview style, or you just want to let it rip? Or
well, let me start with a couple of things and interrupt me, please. Anybody, put questions in the chat. Tell me I'm full of it, and we'll see what happens.
Okay.
So I've been listening for a couple of hours, and it's fascinating. This is the craziest time, and I've been in education probably longer than anybody that you have either listening or on the panel. So I was there in the beginning when we thought that the height of individualization was a book with branched learning, where if you answered question 2 one way, you went to page 4, and if you answered it a different way, you went to page 6. So as we talk about personalization today, it's so incredible to see where we are. At the same time, I think we're still missing the boat in terms of the really, really big picture.
Yeah.
And that is in a number of areas. Number one, when you think about kids who, let's pretend the pandemic is over and kids go to school. Mm-hmm. And let's take one of the hardest courses for many of us, Algebra 1. Killer class. We were doing great in math. We thought we were hot stuff. And all of a sudden you hit Algebra 1 and there are these 2 trains and they're leaving from different cities and at different speeds. And you're thinking, what is this about? And really struggling. And it's a shock because you thought you were so good. So much of how you do in that class will affect your future, how much math you take from there on in, and also your self-esteem. And so much of how you do in the class depends on who your teacher is. So some people get the star teacher and wow, it just makes perfect sense to them. And some people get the brand new teacher or the burnt out teacher or whatever, who just doesn't have the magic to teach that class. And they pay a price for that. We have the technology, we've had it for such a long time. I don't understand why the US Office of Education has not said, all right, let's identify from across the country the 20 or 30 best algebra teachers in the country. Let's look at the Common Core standards. Let's divide them up. Each of these fabulous teachers take 1 or 2 or 3 standards, do the lessons for them, have it recorded, and have a bank of this. So I come in and I'm the algebra teacher, and I'm really good at teaching, simultaneous equations, but I'm not so good at trains. I could get the lessons that I need. The kids could watch it at home. I could watch it at home. And it could improve my own teaching of that lesson, or I could let the kids watch that lesson, and then I could help answering questions. And that would set us up for every child having the possibility of having the best teacher in the country. But we haven't done that.
No, it's crazy. What you're talking about is what I really believe is emerging. It's a network matrix model of best in class. But it requires that you isolate into what teaching should be now, because you don't want to offend every teacher in America that they're not the good teacher in algebra. You want to isolate what is needed by the enterprise now, which I firmly believe is way more social, emotional, and instigation of let's all go, than anything else, right? Because
totally agree.
You don't have to be the best algebra teacher. Right. Just get people in there.
You have to be the best cheerleader for algebra.
Yes, cheerleader, and then a little bit of direct instruction. Take this kid aside; they still don't get it. That's where you're needed. I think we have to define that, Barbara, because there's fear even in the teaching ranks right now, because they've all been shoved in here now, and some of them are failing at it. and they don't understand where their future is. And nobody's getting out there and going, your future is so much more fun for you. Let's talk about this. You know?
That's right. It would be. It absolutely would be. Then the second piece of that is we still use the old paper and pencil model, even though we have it computerized now, of spending 3 weeks in the spring testing kids.
Yeah.
And then getting that graded. And then the teachers get it back in August. Well, what good does it do to get it back in August? Those kids are gone.
Yeah.
The whole point of why we should be testing is to inform our instruction. With technology, somebody please explain to me why we are not embedding the test questions in the instructional materials.
Yeah.
So every morning I could call up my classes, how they did on the questions, and I would know what part I didn't do a good job on because so many kids didn't get it.
Yeah.
And I could change my instruction, or I could then call for some wonderful lesson that's in the bank, the network, that I could use for that because maybe somebody else taught it a whole lot better. So we waste at least 3 weeks of instructional time with all the testing. We traumatize kids with all the testing, and we spend so much time preparing for the testing. All of that could be instructional time if we were just to do something simple like that. And we're California, we're Silicon Valley. We have the talent to do that, but we haven't.
Yeah, a lot of this is like the slow moving glacier of administration. They just don't get it. They don't get what's going on. You know, you do. But I don't know at the state level that we really get it yet.
And at the national level.
Yeah, I live here in Sacramento. I should do something about it.
So maybe somebody will hear it and know somebody who knows somebody.
Yeah. Yeah. But what you're also talking about is the fact that we actually have software right now in most of math, like Achieve 3000 was on earlier. They could do this, right? Like you don't need the test at all because no kid makes it to module 3 unless they hit it in module 1 and 2. They don't even make it out. So we already know they got it. Like, why are you testing us? But understanding what it's doing isn't there yet. Yeah, I totally agree with you. But this is a huge cultural lift at the teaching level as well. They hate the testing. Every survey I've ever run nationally, hate the testing, think testing has gone like ballistic on them. And they feel like they're a slave almost to the stupid tests. And they want to insurrect over it. But, you know, what are you going to do if you're also being held accountable as a school system to your test scores? That's what the state's doing. Right. And they don't feel like how they can get out of it because there's nothing replacing it. So what are your thoughts about what could be done to tell them what's really going on? Like what kind of communication could bubble up?
You had somebody on here before who said he was from Q.
Yeah.
That's one of the organizations. ISTE certainly could be doing that. And when you think about it, the head of ISTE right now, Richard Kulata, used to work for the U.S. Office of Education.
Yeah.
So that would be a natural to say, how much money would it take? $1 million, $2 million? How much of that, what part of their budget is that? That would be a small amount to do something that would be absolutely huge. And teachers would be honored to be selected to be part of this and to work on this.
Yeah.
So I think it's got to be some organization because just saying it to people, yeah, educators agree, but we don't know how to make it happen. And no individual school or district has the ability to do this.
You know, I'm almost wondering if I could motivate all my Edu Jedi. There's 400 schools and districts that are already members.
Yeah.
And have them sort of draft a declaration of independence from testing. You know,
I love it.
Something awesome. And then, so this is our declaration and why, and this is what we're going to do now. There's got to be a way. I love these ideas. Now you just, you know, I talked to you, Barbara, and now I give myself a list of stuff I got to do. So it's awesome.
But look at what a difference you'd make. That could be your legacy. Leilani changed the whole structure of testing in the country.
Yeah, I would be loved. There would be a lot of people who would, you know, send me cards and stuff. That'd be awesome. So you did 2 things. You got more?
Oh, yeah. So we keep talking about personalizing, and we seem to personalize more in the area of I go slower and you go faster, but we're still doing the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And some remarkable software apps like Achieve 3000, which I absolutely adore. We've been using that for more than 10 years, was brilliant in that every student was getting the same story on their own reading level. So if I'm the teacher, I can do a group lesson because we're all reading the same thing, but they're all on their independent level. And so they're all being stretched a little bit at their skill level. But one thing that I haven't seen until now is, why do I have to read the same story that you're reading if I'm not interested in that? So maybe the story is about what's going on in another country and I don't care about that.
Yeah.
What's my interest? To really personalize, you need to be able to teach me the skills in something that I'm very interested in. Yeah. And I don't know, I'm not trying to do a shameless plug for software that I have no involvement in, other than I just heard about it and we're piloting it, but something called Beable is doing that.
I've heard of them.
Jackie Dodelson, she used to work with Achieve. Yeah. So she has come up with this whole system where the first thing you do is you assess the students and you figure out what they're interested in and their ability levels in different areas. And then they read about things they're interested in on their reading level that teaches the same skills that kids are reading other stories about. That's personalization to me. Now,
yeah, and I think Mayan did that. I think they got bought by Renaissance. And then also Vital Source does that. Overdrive does that.
Okay, so there are a number of places, but yeah. They still have to assess how I'm doing in learning whatever it is, sentence structure or consonants or whatever, but in a story that I care about.
Yeah, and I think as a main thing, what you're talking about is Lexile level. In math, it's quartile, right? Mm-hmm. But little boys might want to choose a book on lizards, and little girls might want to choose one on exactly. unicorns. Not to be like sexist about it, but that's
what they might want to choose that.
Yeah, when I was a kid, I might have chose the lizard one, but it's just really, personalization is dimensional now, and personalization is an interchangeable word with equity, I think, because equity is you learn. That's the most basic part of equity, is that you as an individual were learning. You weren't shut out because of any cultural or other reason, right? And that actually boils down to what you're saying, which is your preferences, right? Like, I don't like that stuff. I'm not going to read about bunnies, I'm not doing it. So, yeah.
And then the other opportunity that we have right now, virtual reality, is incredible.
Oh, yeah.
You can teach so much through virtual reality. At a conference a couple of years ago, I virtually welded. I don't know anything about welding, but they taught me enough, put on the headset, and there I was welding a seam. So often there are classes that we can't have because they're too expensive. You can't have all this equipment, but you can if you teach a lot of it virtually, and then the student can test out somewhere else. So maybe in high school, they're learning some of this virtually, and then they test out at the community college to see if they've gained the skills that they need, and may go on to further education in that. And that would give kids a chance to do a lot of things that right now we can't afford. You cannot offer all the different career technical classes because you don't have the room or the money. So we need to start really incorporating virtual reality into teaching, not just as a fabulous and motivating thing for kids. And I do love it. I love going into Costa Rica and going into the rainforest, and the gorillas come up and sit on my lap. And it's really fun. It's motivating, but it isn't necessarily teaching the skills that we need. We can use it that way, and we should look at that.
Yeah, and there is new stuff evolving. Like, you should look at Alelo, ALELO, for their virtual avatars. We just did a full review, and there's an article on our site right now about this. I had several districts review their product, but it's basically been used in the military for a long time. And you get your own teacher avatar that looks like you, and then you can pre-program it to do AI, and it learns what kids are missing over time and comes back to you as a teacher and said, they keep missing this. You're going to have to rechange the program to fix that part, which is cool, right? But when you're also saying VR, right, like the experience of doing something else, I think that that has a long way to go, because you should be able to do things even like learning how to do wood shop and all your science experiments. And, you know, yeah, that I totally agree with you. Money is an issue with regards to this, but now it's also going to be space and time. There's 20% of the kids who won't return. They just don't want to come back to the physical school now. They were maybe the kids that liked it and learned better. They were like, never said anything on campus, were shy. And now you get them on digital, Barbara, and they're like, la, 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 chat, 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 you know? And they don't want to come back to school. Maybe their parents don't want to come back to school. Maybe grandma lives at home and it's a risk, right? So use of VR is gonna, I don't think there's any way it can't take off and be used more. I totally agree with you.
I feel so sorry for teachers right now, because very often in the hybrid model, they're doing both. They're teaching the kids in front of them, but they're talking into the camera.
Yeah.
And I think about what happens when you are in a classroom. That eye contact is so important. That physical presence, we used to call it with itness. If a kid is not engaged or fooling around, you didn't have to say anything. You just walked over while you were still talking, teaching, whatever you were doing, just stood near him. Well, we can't do that now. Yeah. And they turn their cameras off, so we don't know that they're doing whatever they're doing. They could be in another room. So you can't make them turn the camera on. You can ask for it. But even when it's on, we all have been trained now, and we do it pretty well, to talk right into the camera.
Yeah.
If I try to make eye contact with you right now, which I'm doing, then I'm looking down. What you're seeing is not that I'm making eye contact, you're seeing me looking down. Or if I look to the side, now I look shifty, like I'm doing something wrong. So it isn't possible to do that while you're teaching in remote learning. And that is such a big part of that social and emotional connection. We did a conference on Saturday with all our digital innovators. So we had about 400 people who registered for this conference on tricks and applications and strategies for digital education. And one of the teachers very wisely said she uses the children's name as many times as she can. So, you know, Leilani, I love the fact that you're participating with me, and thank you. And Doug, I appreciated that you put something in the chat, because that's a connection. We know it when kids come into the classroom. A lot of teachers stand at the door and greet every child as they walk in. Hi, how are you, Chris? Hi, Heather, good to see you. So in the absence of anything physical, calling kids by name is very important, because we all love to hear our own name.
Yeah, or noticing something about them. Like, you know, I'm noticing you're wearing burgundy and I'm wearing red, and we're in the same palette. Yeah, I totally agree with you. What I want to ask you, though, is this issue of connection is, most superintendents are saying, normal's not coming back. We've fractured the map of space and time use, and it's not going to ever be normal again. And what are we going to do about that in terms of how we're structured? So, you know, almost every school in America is structured the whole group way. But Ben from Lammersville started talking about the logistics of auto cohorting, the dynamics of changing groups within the groups, and the assignment and tag back to which teacher doing what. I really believe that we have to sort of bust out. We have to change the very structure of our execution. Not these ones are online, those ones are physical school. There's no mesh. I think there's some big sort of thing going on with logistics, and that's the nut we got to crack right now. So what are your thoughts on moving in that direction, like experiments and sort of figuring out what the future really is like for this network model dynamics?
Well, when we're online, it's really easy. We say, okay, we're going to go into our breakout rooms now. And we assign different people to different rooms and they can have a discussion in there and somebody's a facilitator. And because, as you say, we're going to lose a lot of kids in the physical school, we'll have more space in schools. And we will be able to do that and have kids really move around more and work in smaller cohorts, depending on ability level and interest level again. And I think it could make school a whole lot more exciting. Some of us who went to school a very long time ago remember sitting all day in rows, and dear God, you had to be a very disciplined child to at least pretend that you were paying very good attention to what was happening. So the whole notion that now we try to do a lot of it. We'll do think, pair, share, and turn to your elbow buddy and have that kind of interaction. But there is no reason why we cannot utilize space and time differently. That presentation was wonderful. It was a little over my head. I would love to visit the school and see it. It was hard for me to take it all in and visualize because it is complicated. But it's a goal worth pursuing without any question.
Yeah, we're definitely in that experimental mode. And that's exciting. I mean, you've probably lived through, because you've been in education for a really long time, you've lived through other exciting moments, but I don't think it gets any more exciting than right now. Like, it's like, wow.
Well, certainly never more challenging than right now.
Yeah, really challenging. Okay, so let's turn it to the emotional burdens right now. You know, I am sure, Barbara, this would have been your number 5, I think you would have brought up, is how are we going to emotionally repair? This still isn't over.
Right.
And just yesterday, talking to San Juan Unified's leadership here in Sacramento, we brought up the idea that there's a lot of grief right now. People have been missing each other. There's been an enormous amount of grief and loss by these children who I mean, you remember being young, you were living to be together, you know, and we took that away from kids for over a year now, almost a year. And there's going to be a repair period. What are your thoughts?
Well, I must be very young because I'm still burning to be with people.
Yeah.
I feel the same way. It's going to be hard. I think there is it's going to be a period when we have to admit kids will have lost that. We can never get it all back. We won't be able to, but we're going to have to work a lot harder. I think we're going to have to recognize that the social and emotional component may have to take precedence over some of the academics that we're so busy trying to push in so that they'll do well on the test. I think we're going to need to give ourselves permission to spend a whole lot more time doing social and emotional activities in class and allowing kids to express their feelings in whatever way they want, whether they're doing videos about it. The California Student Media Festival is coming up. Kids can do videos on their pandemic adventures or their pandemic distresses and express how they're feeling, or doing Flipgrids that kids can share with the class and each other, expressing how they're feeling. We need to concentrate on that because it's the most important thing there is.
Yeah, and it may be that we have found with the change of the pandemic and moving to digital everywhere in the nation, that our job now is 50% that. We always thought it was just like pump out the knowledge, test, pump out more, test. But maybe that's not even 50% of our job anymore. Maybe it's the community, because wow. Just the stories I'm hearing, you know, it's like, holy cow, we never realized we were the hub of social society, and we are. And maybe we don't take that seriously enough.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that we're going to need to help teachers, because not everybody viewed their job as a teacher to be this big hub of social and emotional learning. You know, I'm a social studies teacher. I teach history.
Yeah.
We had enough trouble convincing them that every teacher is a reading teacher. No, I teach history, I don't teach reading. Well, yeah, they have to read in order to do that. So maybe you want to incorporate some of that. But now we need to really emphasize with all our teachers and everybody else who works in the physical building that we all have a role in this, from the bus driver to the people who work in the cafeteria to the people who work in the office, that we have all missed a huge and important component of life for the last, I can't believe it's almost a year. And we're not done yet. We're not done yet. I see a lot of places in the country where schools may not open until next school year, if then. In Napa, I have to say we are so blessed because 4 of our 5 districts are open and have been open for months. The 5th one only is closed because at the time that we were briefly in the red tier, which said we could open, that's when we had the fires and they had to evacuate the entire city of Calistoga. Yeah. So they missed the window of red. By the time everybody came back and they were ready to think about opening, we had sunk into deep purple and nobody was allowed to do that. So, but the rest of us have been open, and I think we have done such a disservice in the way we looked at this whole pandemic. We have data that shows that the kids who are in person right now in a hybrid model, but in person, have we have no transmission in school. That's a primary transmission. So anybody who's getting sick is getting it from outside. And our numbers, the data supports it, that there are more cases in kids who are fully distance learning than there are in the kids who are in school.
Wow, that's wild.
I think they've seen that all over the country. We never should have shut the schools. The schools should have stayed open because kids don't get terribly sick from this. They will get sick, but they get over it. We should have protected the older people and maybe set up a system where for households where there's an older person living there and they were terribly worried about that, okay, we should have had some distance learning for some kids. But not to have closed an entire system like this. This was really, I don't even have the words for it, how we have punished kids.
Yeah, and I think you're wise to pay attention to the emotional side of this, because I think it's way underrated how deep this goes.